Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep. Welcome to day 1 of Knowledge Series, where we will discuss important topics, concepts, issues not related to current affairs, but the static part of your syllabus. Every day we will go live 10 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon to discuss the important static topics for your civil services examination. All we need from you is your continuous support. Like this initiative, like this video, drop in your comments, subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, and the team behind this initiative will be highly appreciative of your support. Towards the end of this lecture, we will also take up your questions so that your doubts are resolved, your queries are addressed. Let's get started and look at the topic for today, which is fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are mentioned under Part 4, capital A of the Constitution. Article 51, capital A deals with a set of fundamental duties. But these fundamental duties were not originally part of the Constitution. These fundamental duties were added to the Constitution when the Constitution was amended in the year 1976 because of 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. And remember, Srimati Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister. The nation was under emergency. 1975, emergency was imposed in this country on the grounds of internal disturbance. And it was during this period of emergency that major changes were made to the Constitution. That is why 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act is also known as a mini revision of the Constitution. And because of this 42nd Amendment, Part 4, capital A was added, Article 51, capital A was added, and a list of fundamental duties were added to the Constitution. Srimati Gandhi was asked, what is the need to have a list of fundamental duties mentioned in the Constitution? She replied that people are aware of their rights. I want to make them aware of their duties as well. But if you look at the constitution of other countries, for example, the Western European countries or United States of America, we don't see any concept related to fundamental duties. Japan is perhaps the only other country, apart from India, where constitution specifically talks about some duties for the citizens. So apart from Japan, India is the other country where the constitution explicitly talks about a list of fundamental duties. And these fundamental duties, let's look at the background. There were some who were not happy with the Constitution. When the Constitution was being debated in the Constituent Assembly, when the Constitution was enacted on 26 January 1950, there were some who were highly critical of the Constitution. Dr. Ambedkar, the architect of our Constitution, he replied. He said, if you're not satisfied with this Constitution, all you need to do, get 2/3 majority in the Parliament and change the Constitution. If you can get 2/3 majority elected on the universal adult franchise, you will be able to change the Constitution. But if you're not able to get the 2/3 majority to change the Constitution, we can assume that only you are dissatisfied with this Constitution. Your dissatisfaction is not shared by the wider public, by the larger public. So get 2/3 majority and change the Constitution, no matter how you want this Constitution to appear. Mr. P.V. Kane, noted Sanskrit scholar, he was also awarded India's highest civilian award, Bharat Ratna, in the 1960s. He was also critical of this Constitution. He said our Constitution is blindly focusing on the Western concepts. We are blindly aping the Western constitutions. And these Western constitutions primarily focus on rights. But we are neglecting our tradition of duties. We have duties towards the fellow citizens. We have duties towards the state. We have duties towards the teachers. We have the duties towards our environment. These duties have been neglected in our Constitution. That's what Mr. P.V. Kane writes in the History of Dharam Shastras, Volume 5. So there were some who were critical of the constitution because our constitution was only focusing on rights and not on the duties. But then a list of fundamental duties was added to the constitution in 1976. And the purpose of these fundamental duties is to make informed citizens. The purpose is to make responsible citizens. That is why we say these fundamental duties, they have educative role to play. Because when we will discuss all these fundamental duties one by one, their entire focus is on how can we create responsible citizens so that as citizens, we abide by the constitution, we respect its ideals, we respect the national flag, the national anthem. That is the purpose of fundamental duties. So if the question is asked in your examination, what is the purpose of fundamental duties? The purpose is to make responsible citizens. That is why we say the purpose of these fundamental duties is to perform an educative role. Let's look at something else. The year was 1976. A committee was set up by the then government headed by Srimati Gandhi. This committee was headed by Sardar Swaran Singh. So these fundamental duties were added to the constitution based on the recommendations of Sardar Swaran Singh committee, which was set up in the year 1976. But one more important point, all the recommendations of Sardar Swaran Singh committee were not accepted by the government. Some were accepted, some were not. And those which were accepted, constitution was amended. The year was 1976. Part 4 capital A was added to the constitution and Article 51 capital A was added. Initially, 10 fundamental duties were added to the constitution. But then the year was 2002 when 11th fundamental duty was added to the constitution because of 86th Constitutional Amendment Act 2002. So you need to understand from the prelims point of view that originally fundamental duties were not part of the constitution. These were added because of 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976 based on the recommendations of the Sardar Swaran Singh committee. All the recommendations were not accepted. Initially 10 fundamental duties were added to the constitution. The year was 2002 because of 86th amendment. 11th fundamental duty was added to the constitution. But when we look at the prelims examination, UPSC tends to focus on memorizing these 11 fundamental duties. Because the wording of some of these duties, they somehow match some of the directive principles as well. So you have to be absolutely sure which of these are directive principles, which of these are fundamental duties. And for that you have to remember, memorize all these 11 fundamental duties. How do you do that? For that I have a solution. I've created an acronym which you can memorize, and through this acronym you can remember and memorize all these 11 fundamental duties. What is that acronym? You're all aspiring for civil services. Some of you would aspire for IAS. Some of you would aspire for IPS, Indian Police Service. Once you're appointed as an IPS officer over a period of time, you may be appointed as an SSP, a Senior Superintendent of Police. But you are a corrupt one. One fine morning, you're having breakfast. There is a knock at your door. You open the door. There are people from anti-corruption unit. They're saying, come gentlemen, we'll take you to court. We will arrest you because you are a corrupt police officer. You will basically ask for a proof. What is the proof on the basis of which you are saying that I'm corrupt? They will show you a DVD where you are taking bribe, exchanging money, money is exchanging hands. Ultimately, what will you do? You will start a PR exercise. You'll basically call all the journalist friends that you know that please don't broadcast the news of my arrest. Please don't publish the news of my arrest. The nation does not want to know that I'm being arrested on the charges of corruption. And ultimately, what will happen? You will win. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. These are the 11 fundamental duties. Using this acronym, you can remember these 11 fundamental duties. How? S, to safeguard public property and to abjure violence. Another S, to strive towards excellence in all areas of human endeavor. P, to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures. SSP. SSP. Now, ACU, to abide by the Constitution and respect the national flag and the national anthem. C, to cherish and follow the noble ideals which shaped our struggle for freedom. U, to uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India. So SSP, ACU, now DVD, to defend the country and render national service when called upon to do so. We, to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. Another D, to develop scientific temper, humanism, and spirit of reform. P and R, to promote harmony and spirit of common brotherhood, and to renounce the practices derogatory to the dignity of women. And the last fundamental duty, W, which was added in the year 2002 because of 86th Constitutional Amendment Act, it imposes the duty on all the parents or the guardians that for your children or for your ward in the age group of 6 to 14 years, you have to provide them educational opportunities. So SSP, ACU, DVD, PR, W. Use this acronym to memorize all these 11 fundamental duties, which is very important for you to memorize for your prelims examination. Clear? Let's look at some of the important points. We say our constitution is bag of borrowings. We have borrowed provisions from different constitutions of the world. For example, procedure established by law, we borrowed from the Japanese constitution. Judicial review, we borrowed from the US constitution. Similarly, election of Rajya Sabha MPs, we have borrowed from other constitutions. Directive principles of state policy, we have borrowed from the Irish constitution. And we have borrowed the provisions related to fundamental duties from the constitution of USSR, the erstwhile constitution of the USSR. Now, USSR as a political entity does not exist because it was dismembered in the 1990s, which led to the end of the Cold War between USSR and United States of America. So if the question is asked in your prelims examination, we have borrowed this feature of fundamental duties from the erstwhile constitution of USSR. But again, once in your prelims examination, this point was asked in your examination by the UPSC. Although Japan is the other constitution which talks about a list of fundamental duties, few fundamental duties, Indian constitution also talks about fundamental duties, but then there are some international covenants, international instruments such as Universal Declaration of Human Rights, such as International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Both these international covenants, agreements, they talk about duties, that duties people will have towards fellow citizens, towards the state. So these international agreements or covenants, they also talk about fundamental duties. Very important point. And another point, no mandamus. What is mandamus? When a public body fails to perform its duty, thereby violates your fundamental rights, what is your option? You can approach the Supreme Court under Article 32. The Supreme Court will issue the writ of mandamus, because mandamus is issued against a government body, against a public body, if this public body has failed to perform its duty. But these fundamental duties, they are not legal duties. The Constitution has not prescribed any punishment if you do not follow and abide by these fundamental duties. So when these fundamental duties are not legal duties, that means even if you do not abide by these duties, somebody cannot approach the court and ask for the writ of mandamus. Mandamus is issued against a public body if it fails to perform its duty. But can mandamus be issued against an individual who has failed to abide by these fundamental duties? No. Why? Because these fundamental duties are not legal duties. I'll mention it here so that it becomes absolutely clear for you. These are not legal duties. And these fundamental duties are exclusively available to the citizens. For example, fundamental rights. Are fundamental rights available to aliens as well? Foreigners as well? Yes. But there are some fundamental rights which are exclusively available to citizens. For example, Article 15, Article 16, Article 19, Article 29, Article 30. These are the 5 fundamental rights exclusively available to citizens. Apart from these, all fundamental rights are available to aliens, foreigners, as well as the citizens. But fundamental duties are exclusively available to the citizens. These are the important points that you have to keep in mind. But then there are also those who criticize the list of fundamental duties. They say that there are some vague ideas mentioned in fundamental duties. Vague ideas such as to cherish and follow the noble ideals which shaped our struggle for freedom, to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. These are not easily comprehensible. These are not easily understood. So there are vague ideas which are mentioned in the list of fundamental duties, where very important duties are not mentioned. For example, duty to pay taxes on time is not a fundamental duty. Duty to vote in Indian elections is not a fundamental duty. Duty to ensure that we follow and practice the family planning programs, because the rate at which we are reproducing, perhaps by 2030, according to various reports, India will surpass China as the most populous country of the world. Although if you look at the recent report, the Family Health Survey report, it says that 2.1 is the total fertility rate, which means across communities in India, there is a sharp decline in fertility. But even then, family planning is not a fundamental duty. Duty to pay taxes on time is not a fundamental duty. Duty to vote in the Indian elections is not a fundamental duty. This is all that you need to know regarding fundamental duties. Now, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and I'll be happy to clarify and resolve all the queries that you may have. Questions one by one, please. What is Swaran Singh Committee? Swaran Singh Committee was set up by the then government of India. It was tasked to provide a list of fundamental duties which we can add to the Constitution. Because if people are aware of their rights, they should be made aware of their duties as well. That is why this committee was set up. So kindly repeat what led to the inclusion of fundamental duties in our Constitution. That's what the then Prime Minister Srimati Gandhi said. People are more aware of their rights. I want to make them aware of their duties as well. That is why a list of fundamental duties was added to the Constitution. And in fact, if you look at the recent statements made by Honorable Prime Minister, he also talks about giving importance to fundamental duties. The ex-Chief Justice of India, Mr. Bobde, Sharad Arvind Bobde, he also talked about giving more importance to fundamental duties. Are fundamental duties enforceable? No. Why? These 11 fundamental duties, they are not legal duties. But at the same time, Constitution has not prescribed any punishment for those who do not follow these fundamental duties. But then, Parliament can enact a law to enforce some of these fundamental duties. For example, to abide by the Constitution, respect its ideals, national flag and the national anthem. This is a fundamental duty. What if I don't follow? Will I be prosecuted? Will I be arrested? Yes. But I will be arrested not because I have violated fundamental duty, but I will be arrested because I have violated a law. And which is that law? The year was 1971, when Prevention of Insults to National Honor Act was passed by the Parliament. And it is this Prevention of Insults to National Honor Act which makes it a crime to denigrate the constitution, to disrespect the national flag or the national anthem. So you will be arrested not for not following fundamental duties, but for violating a law passed by the parliament in the year 1971. Long story short, these 11 fundamental duties are not legal duties. That means even if you don't follow this, no writ of mandamus applies. That's number one. Number two, but parliament is free to enforce some of these fundamental duties, to pass a law, to enact a law to enforce some of these fundamental duties. For example, the 1971 National Honours Act, which makes it a crime if you disrespect the national flag or the national anthem. Now, mandamus, the question is, are terms such as mandamus and not applicable, not enforceable same? Not enforceability means that you cannot approach the court to enforce something. For example, directive principles of state policy. These are not enforceable in a court of law. It is for the state to implement these directive principles of state policy. So if the state is not implementing DPSPs, you cannot approach the court and ask the court to issue a directive so that the state implements a directive principle. For example, Uniform Civil Code. It's a directive principle of state policy. Can you approach the court and ask the court that the state is not implementing directive principles of state policy, is not enforcing Uniform Civil Code, so please direct the state to implement UCC? No, this court cannot do that. But no mandamus means the court cannot issue the writ of mandamus to force you to perform that duty which you have not been performing. That's the difference between the two. Are fundamental duties part of the basic structure of the Constitution? The doctrine of basic structure was propounded by the Supreme Court, a 13-judge bench of the Supreme Court on 24th April 1973. And the Supreme Court said, there is a power available with the Parliament to amend the Constitution. But this power is not absolute. There is a limitation. And the limitation is, Parliament can make a law to amend the Constitution except the basic structure. Basic structure cannot be touched, cannot be altered. But is fundamental duty part of the basic structure? No. Sir, if there is a law for violation of fundamental duties, can we say that they are indirectly enforceable? They can be made enforceable by the Parliament if Parliament makes a law to enforce these fundamental duties. And these fundamental duties can be amended as well. Tomorrow, more fundamental duties can be added to the Constitution. For that, the Parliament needs to introduce a constitutional amendment bill, needs to pass a constitutional amendment bill under Article 368 of the Constitution. Explain basic difference between fundamental rights and duties. Fundamental rights, the whole purpose of fundamental rights is to promote political democracy. The idea is to provide some sense of rights to individuals, because without these rights, the growth, development of an individual is not possible. So there are some rights which we have to give to the people so that they explore their potential. And for that, we have fundamental rights. The purpose of fundamental duty is to make responsible citizens. That's the difference between the two. The purpose of fundamental rights, to promote political democracy. The purpose of fundamental duties, to make responsible citizens, so that citizens are responsible towards the environment, towards their state, towards wildlife, towards their fellow citizens. That's the purpose. Sir, then what is the basic structure of the Constitution? This is something which is done by the Supreme Court. It's the power of the Supreme Court to add more and more features of the Constitution to the list of the basic structure. Rule of law is part of the basic structure. Parliamentary democracy is part of the basic structure. Independence of judiciary is part of the basic structure. Parliamentary democracy is part of the basic structure. Free and fair election is part of the basic structure. There are some fundamental rights such as Article 21, Article 32, which is part of the basic structure. Relationship between fundamental rights and directive principles is also part of the basic structure. So there are lots of things which are mentioned as part of the basic structure, which Parliament cannot change, cannot alter, even by passing a Constitutional Amendment Act under Article 368. Difference between procedure established by law and due process of law. This is something that we will discuss over a period of time. Here, the only intention is related to fundamental duties. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. We will address those queries. Regarding other topics, we are not going anywhere. We'll come back every day, 10 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, to discuss all these important topics. Sir, is the UCC a violation of fundamental rights, that is right to practice on religion? We'll discuss that when we will talk about Uniform Civil Code or when we will talk about freedom of religion under Article 25 of the Constitution. There are some arguments in favor of Uniform Civil Code. There are some arguments against the enforcement of Uniform Civil Code. We'll discuss it then. I think that is it for today. Early morning, Monday morning, 10 o'clock, we started this initiative. Please share your love, support by liking this video. Comment once the video is over. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, and come back today, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, to discuss a topic related to modern history, and we will discuss the doctrine of lapse. So stay with us throughout this journey, knowledge series. The primary intention is to give you conceptual clarity so that you crack the civil services examination in your first attempt. Thank you for being with us. Stay safe, stay happy, all the best. Bye-bye.